Hello there, welcome to the PlugBox Podcast, where we discuss all things EV and renewables and generally have a damn good chinwag. Anyway, on with the show.
Good evening.
Hello there.
Hey. Welcome to another week's podcast, PlugBox Podcast. How are you today?
Oh, splendid. Just another day in paradise, another week, another PlugBox Podcast.
And another batch of interesting news as well.
Many newses today.
I've got a list. I've written another list on paper.
Are you a listy type of person, Pete?
I think when I want to be truly organised, yes. But you'll be pleased to know that it is old paper that I'm reusing the back of to not waste it. So, yeah, maybe I'm a listy person.
You have an upcycled list.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. That will go into the recycle bin when I'm done. But yes, I have a list. And I have, maybe it's a quick fire round to start with. We have some small snippets of news. Some very fresh, I hasten to add, hot off the press. So what I want to start with, and I think it's coming as a bit of a relief to the industry and to everybody really, that things are starting to positively change in the UK with regards to COVID. The dealerships are starting to open again. So for anybody that lives abroad, UK has basically been on lockdown now for several months. Everything has basically been closed, including vehicle dealerships. And as the COVID lockdown restrictions start to relax, as our figures of infection rate are decreasing, so things can start to open again. So car dealerships are one of those things, and I'm sure they'll be breathing a sigh of relief. So
hopefully not breathing too hard, though.
No, absolutely not. No. So that is some good news, I think. I hope that other countries are starting to recover in that sense as well. Next interesting piece of news, over to France. We're going to hop across the channel to talk about our French neighbours. They are taking some very interesting steps. I read in the news earlier in the week that the French government are working towards banning short-haul domestic flights, which is an interesting tack to try and save on emissions and meet the targets that their government has laid down internally. So I think that's quite a positive step from their point of view.
So what you mean is the French mob are starting to dust off their yellow vests once again then?
No comment. But they have got quite a good rail network there, so maybe
the TGV is really good and much cheaper than railway travel here in the UK. You know, it's not cheap by any means, but you know, per unit distance travelled, it's much more affordable. But
it's reliable.
It kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? Like in the world we live in now, you know, even for internal flights, what is it, an hour or a couple of hours before, you know, you've got to check in, and reasonably you want to be at the airport, you know, a little bit before that. And you know, then you've got the flight, and then you're milling around afterwards, getting your luggage and
picking up the hire car,
getting a hire car. Yeah. So actually, you know, most railways are point to point, at least, you know, intercity, so to speak. I can see the furore and people getting upset about it, but equally, it kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things. Yeah,
I agree. I think I'm going to show my age, but it's actually a nice way to travel on the train. It's relaxing. You get plenty of feet space. If you're like me, you're quite lofty. You struggle to squeeze yourself into an EasyJet seat. So the train is definitely a nice way to travel. So that was some interesting news from French France. Unfortunately, by contrast, the UK maybe is not doing quite the same thing. So I saw that news from France pop up, and underneath it was the fact that Southampton has this week had approval to expand its airport. And this is one of another 6 airports in the UK, regional airports looking to expand. So maybe not heading in quite the same direction.
No, and it people have different viewpoints, right? Like, you know, we used to have these regional airports, but it seems now any small local airport is an international airport. And, maybe a controversial view, but like Heathrow, back when the world was normal in 2019, if you went to Heathrow, it was always round, and there was literally planes queuing up in the sky. Like you could see them, right? Like steps into the sky. And, one argument is if we build more capacity, then we're going to have more flights and more airlines and more emissions. But I can see the argument for Heathrow, which is fit to busting. But these regional airports, like Southampton and a few of the other ones, it seems to be the wrong direction, as you say, and the wrong message to say. Let's expand flights even more so. But yeah, it's a sharp contrast, as you say, to French France.
Yes. Moving on then, I think that's probably most of the non-EV related quickfire, but I'm going to hop over to Ferrari. Have you seen the news from Ferrari this week?
Go on, let me know.
As if you don't know. Ferrari to launch its first EV in 2025. A day I never thought I would see coming. First they announced an SUV and now an EV.
Is old man Ferrari turning in his grave, you think?
You said that last week. You said those very words last week. He's turned back again.
Well, they're making an SUV, and now they're making an EV. And we all know, obviously, Sergio Marchionne, the now sadly deceased ex-chairman of FCA and Ferrari, was never keen on EVs. But I don't know. Clearly the same as the SUV, right? They're having to build an EV. Not just because of compliance, but also customer demand.
Yes.
Most of their clientele will live in urban areas, which very quickly are going to have, no-go zones for ICE vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And also now that Ferrari are a public company, which is telling in how many models they've now got, is they want to capture more market share. They want to sell more vehicles. And I'm sure there's a budding clientele of wealthy people around the world that may buy a Ferrari, but don't want a V12 or a V8 burning fossils.
Yeah. So Ferrari are quoted as saying, or rather the chairman of Ferrari has said, "You can be sure this will be everything you dream the engineers and designers at Maranello can imagine for such a landmark in our history." They are magnificent words.
It's just PR speak, isn't it?
Of course.
I'd quite like to know where they're going to get the tech from, because as much as, from racing, they've got the KERS system and that kind of thing. Ferrari haven't really developed a lot of battery tech. Obviously they've just launched the SF90, which is a ridiculous £1 million, 1,000 horsepower car, I think, which is a plug-in hybrid. But, where are they going to get the tech from?
Remains to be seen. They've given next to no details about this, as you can well imagine. It's a good few years away yet. But they are saying things like, if we bring new technology, then we need to bring something new to the market. So they're obviously going to attempt something a bit different. And we've seen previously they have leaked patents suggesting that the firm has been working on a four-wheel drive two-seater that would feature an electric motor on each wheel. So perhaps something a little bit interesting is going to come to market in a few years' time.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to it being a public company, right? Is they have to be making the right noises. So 2025 maybe is an unveil, but actually when's the product going to be in the hands of customers? I would imagine it's probably after 2025. But no, I mean, we know, they've been spun out from FCA some years ago now, or Stellantis, whatever it's called this week. So it's not as if there's an abundance of tech that would suit Ferrari in that realm. We know Ferrari work very closely with Pininfarina, and of course Pininfarina have got their Battista car, but of course underneath that it's just a Rimac, but Rimac are owned, at least a substantial ownership is Porsche, so the chances of one Ferrari going knocking or Porsche allowing them to use Rimac technology is slim to none. So how they're actually going to develop an EV
They wouldn't want
in
that
the next
face.
4 to 5 years? No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, is it good they've made the announcement? Yeah, but I kind of think they've been forced into it the same as the SUV. You know, they've been kicking and screaming rather than they're doing it for the love of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway,
I mean,
maybe I'm being cynical.
Perhaps. Last year, Ferrari sold 9,119 cars, which was around 10% down on previous year. Just an interesting fact to end on. So less than 10,000 cars in 2020, which of course was far from a normal year anyway. Let's see where that one goes. A long time to wait before we see anything from them, I'm sure. Next brand I want to touch on is, actually, I think also this one is genuinely really interesting. So recently, in the last year or two, we've seen Alpine make a resurgence with its new A110 sports car. And this week they've announced that they are going to introduce 3 electric vehicles under the Alpine brand, starting with an all-electric SUV. So we know that Alpine are a subset or a sporty subset of Renault, but I didn't see this one coming. Honestly speaking, I think it's quite interesting news.
Yeah, as you say, you know, Alpine was supposed to be the sports or performance arm, right, of Renault, mainly because Renault increasingly are going down the electric path. There's many other manufacturers, particularly in Europe. So for them to come out not only with the announcement that they're going to make an EV, but an EV SUV, I think 2 vehicles in there, but is, as you say, surprising. But who knows? Alpine's got a lot of heritage, especially in France. We know French people buy French cars. Of course, we know the resurgence of the Alpine brand in motorsport. Obviously, Renault F1's now Alpine F1. Had a bit of a rebrand. So, yeah, I mean, if there's some brand cachet behind there, then great. But as you say, it's a strange one. I don't know who would associate Alpine with an SUV or a crossover, but then maybe you could say the same thing about Mustang. So, strange world we're living in.
It is, yeah. What's next then? Have you seen the new EQS? Within the last 2 hours, this has been unveiled. So we talked about this at length last week in the PlugBox podcast, which is available to listen to on YouTube. So please go and have a listen to last week's. But they've now unveiled it. You can now see what it looks like without the camouflage. What do you think? I know styling is very subjective, but you're entitled to an opinion.
I mean, yeah, we know the headline thing that they've been talking about now for a week or so is how low the coefficient of drag is, right? So to make it super slippery and efficient and push the range as much as possible. But for me, it kind of just looks like an AMG GT 4-door or a CLS, which is basically the same car anyway.
CLS. I liked the original CLS. I think that was a very pretty car.
The original CLS was really, really well sold and popular. I think the current one's not doing so well. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool looking car, right? And I think the main thing is, you know, for people that are chauffeured about in S-classes, it is unquestionably better for them to be chauffeured around or rolling around in one of these, especially in urban areas, than in an S-class with a V8 or a V6 diesel or something. You know, this is not a car that's going to save the world, but it's certainly better than the alternative S-Class.
How long before the Maybach becomes an EV?
I think we made a similar comment about the Rolls-Royce Phantom, right?
Yes.
It seems ludicrous that in a car that's not got any particular price point to hit, the mass is already through the roof. It just makes sense for big luxury barges to be electrified.
Yes.
You know, whisper quiet, smooth, Plenty of low end torque, and as you say, the price point is not an issue. But I'm sure something like that's in the pipe. Mercedes have had a resurgence, haven't they, in recent years with the Maybach brand, with the GLS and as you say, the S-Class model. So maybe that's forthcoming with this, and we'll see an EQ Maybach or something akin to that.
Yes, for sure. I think we'll start to see this technology slowly dribble its way down the range as well. So not necessarily upwards, but the smaller vehicles in the Mercedes lineup, whether it be A-Class, C-Class, E-Class, whatever, it's going to work its way down. Sooner the better, honestly speaking.
And I think this is nearly 500 miles or close to?
478 miles. Yeah, it's astonishing range, really.
Yeah, so, on a cold day, giving it some on the motorway, it's going to be, pretty much 400 miles into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this, as we said, has been designed for executives that drive between cities or in and around cities all day long, and that's great. So, yeah, another Halo product. We've talked about, and it's a common theme in the last few episodes, which, as you say, is on the YouTubes. It's good to have products like the Taycan or like the EQS or the Lucid Air, because not only does that technology drip down into the mass market eventually, but it's good to have iconic Halo cars at the top that people can aspire to and people want.
Correct. Yes.
And showcasing the best of what we can do, because the combustion engine, I think we've after 120 odd years, coincidentally since Mr. Benz came up with it, we've pretty much perfected it, and it's not going to get much better at this point. Whereas there's so much scope for improvement in EVs.
Emissions regs have obviously taken us quite a distance, but I think we're coming to the end of what we can really do with a combustion engine to improve it and minimise its gaseous outputs.
Definitely.
Yeah, so do take a look at the new EQS online, and if you want to hear a bit more of Pete and I talking about it online, it's on the YouTubes, as Pete has just said. Audi, what about the Q4? Another Germanic brand.
It's good looking, isn't it?
Again, the styling is subjective, but for me, it's one of the better looking Audis we've seen in a few years. I think it's not overstated, but it's quite edgy at the same time.
I think I might have quite a controversial view on this, but it's a yummy mummy's car, isn't it?
Ooh, careful now. I mean,
well, it is, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? The classic, middle class school run car at the minute is, a Q3, a Mercedes GLC, or a BMW X3, and I can just see this outside the school gates, which is better than having a diesel engine on tick over outside your kid's school. And I can just see it as a keeping up with a Joneses sort of thing, where I've now got an electric Audi, and no doubt there'll be other offerings. But I think it's good because it's just another area in the automotive world where EVs are going to make an impact. And as soon as one person gets one outside the school gates, then
they'll be littered.
Someone else will
the
want
streets.
one. Yeah. But as you say, I think it's much better than the iX3 or, I think it's nearly 300 miles into it. The price doesn't seem too unreasonable. It's available in the sportback form, similar to the
SUV and
Q3.
Sportback. That's right.
So
yeah, up to 321 miles. So we both know that that's probably 280, 290 and at best. Talking about an introduction in June, so quite soon. It's not a long way off, which is quite nice. Going back to the more traditional way of introducing vehicles, unveiling it and then making it available for purchase. And it says on the material that it's priced from around £36,000. which is very affordable for an electric Audi, I would say.
Yeah, whether you can actually get it out of the aforementioned dealership at that price, I'd question. I'm sure the Vorsprung or the S-Line or whatever it is these days will be substantially more than that. But as you say, it's not, when you say it like that, it's not that dissimilar to a Q3. A Q3 might start a little bit cheaper, but again, once you've got some spec on it and you've ticked a few of those obligatory German option boxes, then you're talking very similar money. And of course, another point that again we talked about in I think maybe a recent podcast or a few podcasts is this is just another MEB platform car. It's a VW ID4 with a nice suit on it, basically, isn't it?
Of course, that's just smart engineering.
Yeah, but it's I don't know. I think it's a really cool car, and like I said, I think it'll appeal to a certain audience. And once they start getting into suburbia on people's drives and outside people's schools and in supermarket car parks, then I think people's eyebrows will be raised when they're humming around. And it's an attractive and practical car, and especially in the UK, people want premium German cars, and I think that EV component of it as well will sell really well.
For sure. Yeah, available in 2 battery options, so a 52 kilowatt hour battery, obviously with substantially less range, around 212 miles. And then, of course, the bigger battery option, 77 kilowatts. Not clear whether that's usable or total capacity, but that's good for the 300 or so miles. Once you take into account real world scenarios. So yeah, nice looking car.
Absolutely.
Certainly one that would interest me.
Pete, I've got a fantastic segue. Are you ready?
Oh, go on.
Speaking of MEB platform cars, the Skoda Eniya.
Yeah. I've liked the look of this car since it was first unveiled last year. And I don't think I've changed that opinion, actually. The Skoda styling is something, again, we shouldn't speak too much about something that's subjective, but it is just my opinion here. But I prefer the styling of Skodas than I do to their mother brand, VW. And this is a big car.
Yeah, so I think it's marginally bigger than the ID4, right? And we've seen that, I think, a few times from Skoda where similar cars to the VW mother model, if you like, are larger, and you see buckets of them on the road. And yes, Skoda styling definitely in the last few years has improved. I think they're a lot sharper and maybe more aggressive. But as I said, the Segway, another MEB platform car, and I think this one starts from about 32 grand in the UK as well.
I haven't seen the prices, but yes, I think it is. Yes, there we go. So yeah, 35k pounds up to north of 40,000. But again, if you tick any boxes on your order form, that's going to go up very quickly.
Yeah, I had a quick swizz through, and I think they sadly taken some inspiration from the German brands seem to nickel and dime you on everything. Like, there doesn't seem to be rear seat USBs, and you have to pay for quicker charging. And yeah, there's a few things where you've got to pay, but ultimately that gets the low sticker price. And if you want extra bells and whistles, then sadly you're going to have to pay for it. But and I think that shows the contrast, right? With the Q4 is a very similar starting price, but reasonably expect to add a good few £1,000s on top of that in options, no matter which car you go for.
Yeah, kind of normal practice now, but it's a large car, certainly suitable for families, and will be very familiar to anybody that's used to that family of brands anyway.
Yeah, they say it's an all-electric SUV, but, I look at it and I think it's just a classic station wagon, isn't it, really? It's just a little bit higher.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a classic family car that you throw the kids in the back and the dog in the boot and, all the rest of it. And, yeah, it's just a family car, but it's electric, and that can only be great, really.
Yes. Yeah, I think it will do quite well. So it has an official range of 333 miles. That's more than the ID4, interestingly enough. But, of course, real-world mileage will vary, I'm sure.
Well, you know why, don't you? The difference between that soft plastic and that hard plastic weighs a lot less.
Yeah, very feasible. Very feasible. So 77 kilowatt hour battery.
That sounds
maximum
familiar.
Charge rate of 100 kilowatts. Yeah, of course. It's just all the underpinnings of the VW group. But it'll be. Can't help but think that it's going to be a competitor of the ID4, but and possibly the Mach-E too.
Yeah, the Mach-E for sure. I don't know internally within the Volkswagen group whether they take a big picture view of, does it really matter if a Skoda outsells a VW, or does it just matter about the total picture? I'm not sure. I'm sure there'll be empire building at a certain level, but I would imagine Volkswagen Group at large and the shareholders only really care about the total number, rather than where that particularly comes from. But yeah, standard Volkswagen platform approach, really, right? Rinse and repeat, and use the technology with a slightly different badge and skin on it.
Yeah, and certainly the Skoda brand has come a long way from its original Czech roots back in the day.
Yep.
Okay. What else have we got on the list, Pete?
It's your list. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just browsing now.
We already through things.
Yeah, we have pretty much got through the news this week, but there were a couple of surprises I'm going to spring on you at the end.
Okay.
Have you seen or heard of the Dacia Spring?
Yes. I don't think I'd fit in it, but I've certainly seen it.
No. So the Dacia Spring, Dacia, for those that don't know, is Renault's affordable arm. Yeah, or cheap if you want to describe it as that. So we've talked about Alpine being the sporty arm of Renault, and Dacia or Dacia, depending on what part of the world you're from, is their more affordable arm. And they are introducing an EV called the Spring, and it's launching back in France, and it's dubbed as Europe's most affordable electric car, starting at €12,500. So very affordable cut price offering from Renault. Looking into the spec, it's got a 26.8 kilowatt hour battery. That's very specific. And we're told 140 mile range, and that's WLTP. So rule of thumb would say that's probably on a cold day 100 miles. Limited charge rate, just 30 kilowatts from CCS DC charger, and a top speed of 62 miles an hour. But as a city car, which for poodling around Paris, well, I think very sensible thing, really. It's small too, as you say. It's only 3 meters long or so, 3.5 meters.
I mean, this comes from a vehicle that they make in China, right? And it's just been tweaked or updated or bolstered, I think, for Europe, right? And I think the key thing is, like, for people, as you say, that just drive around cities, it's ideal. The Twizy maybe is a step too far. especially as soon as you get wet when you're driving.
We could do a whole episode on Twizy, Pete. What a car! What a car!
I love it. I love a Twizy. But yeah, this car is, when you look at it and look at it against a normal car, is tiny, but you know, smaller mobility. Maybe that's all that's needed. And 100 miles. If you think about trying to drive across London or Paris, you're not going to do 100 miles in a day. Do a few miles and it'll take you hours to do it. But it'll be interesting to see what incentives go along with this, because €12,500 is, well, it's a lot of cash, but it's not a lot of cash when you're talking about a fully fledged car. And
I have a feeling. Sorry, Pete. I have a feeling that this is going to replace a car sharing service that I think Renault have introduced into Spain. So they're currently using Zoe's in Spain. Zoe, another great car from Renault, let's be honest. But this, of course, is even more affordable. I suspect they've got a lot of data from those rideshare vehicles or car share vehicles, and they've realised that actually the range of that car surpasses the needs. So maybe that this will take its place.
Yeah. And like I said, it'll be interesting to see, how cheap can you actually get it? I mean, I remember seeing not so long ago a Renault Kangoo, which of course is a different vehicle, right? It's a very small van, but for sale in Germany, and the lease price of it was €0 a month, because
astonishing, yeah.
The incentives were so high that actually, after you take into account all the grants, the monthly lease cost after a small deposit was nothing. So again, with this car, if it's €12,500, if you've got anything, even if it's €4,000 or €5,000 in incentives, and you'll probably get more than that, I would imagine, in certain countries.
Yes.
You're going to be talking about single-digit thousands of euros for a brand new car with a warranty and all the rest of it is, if you're in a city.
The French government currently offers grants to buyers of vehicles of less than £45,000 if it's an EV. Sorry, 45,000
So this one just squeaks
euros.
Under then?
Yes. Yeah, yes. So that amounts to 27% of the cost of purchase, including tax, and a further €2,500 if the EV is bought in exchange with an older combustion engine vehicle. So harping back to the days of scrappage. So you're going to be able to get this fairly cheap if you've got an old banger, a 2CV or something to trade in. It's fine. And the French are honestly not that pretentious about their vehicles. They're not too precious about the cars that they drive. They just want something honest that works, gets from A to B. And I think this fits the bill rather nicely.
And it's easy to pull a dent out of if you live in Paris.
Oh, you don't pull a dent out of it. You just leave it there. Just leave it there.
Go on, what's the next topic you're going to spring on me? I'm unprepared for.
Yeah, well, you are completely unprepared for this one because I'm going to catch you really off guard. Or I would do if my internet browser was working. So we're going to jump from one country to another. We're going to go to Russia. You surprised by that move? Have you ever heard of Kamaz?
No.
Of course you have. You know the Paris-Dakar Rally.
Okay. Is the big truck made by them?
Yes, you've got it.
Okay.
So
the Red Bull truck, right?
Yes, exactly. So Kamaz have unveiled a concept, an EV concept called the Kama One. Feel free to look it up. It is available to look at online. It's quite a well-equipped little car, actually. It comes with a 33 kilowatt-hour battery, and they are claiming it's good for a range of up to 155 miles. 80 kilowatt electric motor. It's quite quick for a little car, 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds. I think it's quite a cute looking little car, to be honest with you.
I mean, I mean, I know Russia's quite close to your heart, Pete, but it looks like something out of a Kinder Egg.
Yeah, but I like small cars. Always have done. I've always owned Minis. You know that.
It does look quite cute. How practical it actually is, I'm not sure, but yeah, I guess.
But again, we've just been talking about small city cars.
True, very true.
They have their place in numerous countries and cities around the world. So I'm never gonna scorn a company making the move towards electric vehicles, particularly as this one is done in conjunction between universities. So it's good for kids' education as they grow up, and yeah, I think an interesting little offering there. Through a real curveball.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a big departure from the Red Bull truck, right?
Yes. It's not the first car they've made in history, but certainly it's their first EV anyway.
It's growing on me.
So it should. It's an awesome looking little car. It's got wheel arches, flared wheel arches.
I guess it's very similar to a Japanese kei car, right?
Yep. Which sell like hotcakes in Japan.
This is also true. Interesting. We'll see how well it does. Not sure about how well it'll cope with the roads in Russia.
It is just a concept. It's not something that I think is available to buy yet, but give it time. Let's see what will happen. That's everything I've got on my list, Pete.
Is that another PlugBox podcast done for the week?
I think it is, yeah.
It's number 5. We're halfway to double digits.
We are, yes. And of course, do look back at our YouTube channel. You can find previous episodes on there, but we'll continue to do them weekly. So you can listen live and throw some questions in if you so wish. Otherwise, we'll speak to you all next week. Thank you very much for listening.
Cheers.
Cheers, Pete. Bye.